This is Everyday Spirituality, a podcast by Connect.Faith. I'm Debbie Bronkema, and I'm talking with Bryan Bardin about our podcast and about the ways that we've been getting to hear people express themselves in their practices of creativity that they find spiritual, and also listening to folks about how they act out their faith as justice seekers.
Hey, Debbie.
Hey, Bryan.
This particular episode is coming right between the first 5 episodes, which were all filmed back in October of 2019 during our pilot season, and the episodes that we have recorded from February of 2020 during our second season. We thought this would be a good time to take a minute to sort of reflect on some of the interviews we've heard, but also to talk about our creative, spiritual, and justice-oriented practices that are happening now during this very interesting time. We're recording mid-May 2020, right in the middle of the coronavirus and COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess, Debbie, I'd like to start with you. What are some of the practices that you are doing now during this time that are different than ordinary?
One of the things that happened for me is I like to do some version of an examine, it's an Ignatian spiritual practice where you look at your day and you think about where did I feel filled up by the Spirit of God, and where did I feel the Spirit of God draining out of me? And what I found is that practice was too difficult during this particular time. I would get caught up in my mind with thinking through the day, and it wasn't healing. It wasn't filling me up. So I went to a practice I learned from creative writing as a spiritual practice, which is to do a daily haiku. You might remember haikus from elementary school, 5 syllables on the first line, 7 on the second, 5 on the third. And so it's a really intentional practice where you put into that short of a phrase what your day was about, where you felt filled up, where you felt empty. And I found that was really good and really healing for me, really got me to think hard about what had happened the day before and what I could learn from and how I could grow in that time.
Do you find that the constraint is what helps you, or is it more thinking about it more poetically that helps you reflect on the previous day and helps you find that healing?
So I think both are what is really important for me. I think for me, the poetic part helps. I really like the sound of words and the music that you feel in the words as you write them. But having the constraint really makes me get to the core of what it is that I'm thinking and feeling, the core of what I want to say to God, if I see it as a prayer or in relationship to God.
Constraint could well be the theme of many people's quarantined experience.
Exactly. So it's a very good fit for where we are right now.
Right.
So what about you? What's one of the things that's helped you along this journey?
Yes. So as I was thinking about this before the podcast began, the first thing that I thought about is I'm just trying to give myself more grace right now. And I've sort of titled it Being Okay Time. What I find is that throughout the course of a week, I'll hit a limit, and I don't always know why, and I don't always know when it's going to happen. And I try to just offer myself the grace to spend that time just doing what it is to help me be okay. And sometimes it's productive. Sometimes it's cleaning a kitchen cabinet. Sometimes it is literally just lying in bed watching an hour worth of YouTube videos. But whatever it is, I try not to be judgmental, and I try to allow myself that grace to just be okay.
So then do you listen to yourself and try to figure out what is it that I need? How do you decide what to do when you feel that feeling?
You know, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I think that sometimes it's clear what will help me sort of be filled up again. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes, frankly, I get it wrong. I think that there's something powerful about giving yourself permission to do something, even if it's not productive, even if it's not the number one thing on your to-do list, to give yourself permission to do what you need to get filled back up.
Sounds like grace. When I think about it. Yeah. Sounds like the definition of it to me. That's absolutely what it is. Yeah.
A lot of times I'm my own harshest critic. And so while I may be a fan of grace conceptually and for others, it's often hardest for me to offer that to myself. And I've been trying to be intentional about offering that to myself, especially during these times.
That's definitely a good tool.
And I know one of the things that you and I both have been doing is moving more. I was wondering if you could tell me what that looks like for you.
I've been really analytical about it. I decided that I wanted to move 150 minutes a week. And I look ahead at the weather report and make sure that I'm going to be able to walk on any given day and schedule it in there. And if I can't walk, I figure out what exercise I can do in the house to make sure that I get at least 150 minutes, if not more. And I think the exercise itself is helping, the moving is helping, the fresh air is helping. But I think also the having a piece of paper that I'm writing down the numbers seems to be satisfying to me. Like, okay, I'm doing something that I was planning to do, and look, I actually made it happen. That feels really good.
I'm the same way. I have one of the Apple Watches, and one of the things about the Apple Watch is it keeps track of your exercise and your activity. And I love seeing the little rings get filled up. And I have been spending more time walking outside.
Yeah.
And I live in Florida. It's beautiful. The sun is shining, and the vitamin D and just being outside, being in nature has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you do have that advantage. In New York, I have to look what the weather's going to be. Although I think in mid-May, we might really be here. We might really be at a point where I can keep walking outside.
And the other thing for me about moving was that this was something that I neglected at first, and I found that it was easy to not move. So what actually changed for me was somebody made an offhand comment, I think in a podcast I was listening to, that come the end of the quarantine, people are either going to be worse off than they were before it started, or they're going to be better off. There were very few people who were going to come out of it in the same mental, physical, spiritual shape as when they went in. And I felt convicted by that statement, because if I wasn't going to do anything, then almost undoubtedly I would come out worse than I went in. And it resonated with me, and it inspired me to think about this and to try to do something so that I come out of it better than I went in.
That's interesting. I saw, that Maslow's pyramid that says, what are our basic needs? And right now, we need to be paying attention to our basic needs, but a lot of us are feeling some sort of a guilt. If we're healthy, then we should be self-actualizing at this moment. And that's great if there's room for that. But the reality is we need to eat healthy food and walk and find our way to be as healthy as we possibly can, because that's really where we are.
So what else have you been experimenting with?
This one came because I found, I'm a pastor, and that means that I'm still working all the time and trying to make what I did before make sense in this current environment, make it technological, make phone calls, whatever it is I need to do. And so I wasn't figuring out how to unplug because I needed to be connected to my phone. And I was used to sitting in a certain place in my house most of the time. So what worked was I started to say, okay, that's the place I'm going to sit in when I'm working. That's where I'm going to leave my phone plugged in so I can hear it. But I'm going to move to another space when I need some downtime, when I need to read, or when I need to watch Netflix, or whatever it is I need to do that feels less focused. And I think I was exhausted from trying too hard to focus too much. So making these spaces in the house have different purposes is really been one of the things that has helped.
So the last thing that I've been doing that I think might be interesting to share is that I've been finding a lot of different ways to find community online. And I know that Zoom has gotten somewhat of a bad reputation during this period of quarantine. I know Zoom fatigue is a real thing for a lot of people, but having some way to stay connected with friends and family, whether that's through big Zoom calls or just text messages, that's been really important. And I've also, more than ever before, started to develop community with strangers online. Some of the places that I've been doing that is actually with gaming on Twitch, which is something that a lot of younger people are very familiar with. It's people who go online and they play a video game, and then people just watch them play the video game. But you're not just watching. You're in a chat room and you're talking with other people who have at least one interest that you share, which is this video game. But you begin to develop some sense of people behind these usernames. And if you find the right community, if you find a more wholesome maybe community, it can be a really powerful thing. I've also begun finding that on Patreon. I feel very privileged to have a job right now. And so, I've been trying to be intentional about supporting the work of some people that I appreciate that help fill me up and sustain me. And I've been supporting them on Patreon and finding community there in comment threads. Again, the value of all of this really comes down to finding the right communities and being intentional about not just joining the biggest community, but finding the one that fits you and meets you where you are.
Right. It sounds like you're finding places where you can be genuinely yourself and meet other people, and that's a hard thing to do right now. I think that one of the things I've appreciated that I didn't expect to was the community. We started to do a virtual coffee hour on Zoom, and I'm really happy that it reached out to people who are alone, really alone.
Absolutely. And if you can find that with your church group, that's fantastic. And maybe you can find that to some degree with us at Connect.Faith. We wanted to take a minute and look back at the first 5 episodes of Everyday Spirituality. They came from our pilot season, which we filmed back in October. The first was Cass Giorsi.
That was so much fun. Listening to her talk about how movement had made such a difference in her life, how learning different kinds of movement had made her first understand discipline and later understand freedom and breathing and how your spirit and body connect. I felt like I learned so much from that conversation.
And she's a great person to follow on social media because she's always doing interesting things, and she's doing Zoom movement classes and yoga classes, and it's a lot of fun to follow her.
Episode 2 was Ike and Misty Sturm.
I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to interview them, and I'm very thankful how core both Ike and Misty, independently and in their own way, are part of the Connect.Faith community.
I love the way they put their creativity and their spirituality together and make music that just invites everybody in.
And the way that they promote justice, with Ike and his partner Jesse and their band Endless Field with Biophilia Records doing some amazing earth care messaging and advocacy. And Misty and her work as a teacher and with her family, the way that they see justice as central to their creativity and their spirituality is inspiring. And Ike and Misty are another example of people who are doing some really incredible work in the midst of this pandemic period and this quarantine. And so if you're not following Ike, you really should. They're doing new settings to traditional pieces. They're doing live family concerts. They've done some really cool things over the past couple of months. So the next episode we released was April Castoldi.
Oh, April. Her line that was our favorite was I'll buy you crayons. Go ahead and go back and draw as you did as a child, and don't feel stuck. Don't feel like you can't do something because you don't define yourself as an artist.
It's not
Go back
art.
to before somebody told you that you weren't an artist, and let that part of you speak.
Yeah, I love it. And I am one of those people who don't consider myself an artist. And yet I found that my doodles have become more circular in nature. And I wouldn't go so far as to call them mandalas, but they're definitely headed that way. There's beauty to this practice that she has cultivated. And at the risk of sounding like a broken drum, April has been doing some really cool art and posts on social media, especially on Facebook. That's where I follow her. And it's a lot of fun when I see her name pop up on my newsfeed.
So then the next person we talked to was Mark Orendorff from Cedar Kirk.
And both you and I have known Mark for a very long time. And yet somehow during that interview, I feel like I got to understand Mark a little bit better. I understood where his passion and drive for justice comes from, and that it comes from work he has done first inside his own being. And that inspired him to then do work in the world.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. The things that he teaches, people just don't know are happening in the world. and it changes them. I mean, not just for the week that they're there, but forever. 2 weeks ago, we published the episode with Justin Hilden being interviewed by Caitlin Westervelt. They were talking about Justin's passion for writing poems in response to Psalms.
In that interview, Justin actually reframed my own thinking about how to approach different types of media or different works of art. He talked about how he would often go to a critical place, not negative, but trying to take it apart, trying to understand the significance and the importance. He wasn't engaging with it on a deeper level because it was so intellectual. And I think that the idea that for him, approaching it as an art form and responding to it in poetry allowed him to connect with the work on a deeper level. And I found that I often have been thinking about that. How can I find a different way to engage with this work of art or with this piece of media so that I can enjoy it in a different way?
Right. It's like moving it out of your head into your spirit and responding there.
And Justin has been doing some really incredible things on his social media channels. It's been fantastic to see this individual who had a flip phone not but a couple of months ago really embrace technology during this quarantine and create some amazing stories, do some really powerful and insightful social media videos. So you should definitely follow Justin Hilden.
So then I guess the question is, what's next? What is coming in these next few months?
Right before all of this happened, back in February, we sat down and we filmed a bunch of stuff that's going to be part of our season 2, our second season. And we did some interviews with some really incredible individuals, and we're really excited for you to hear them.
Our hope for the future is that everyday spirituality is an ongoing conversation, that we're able to record it not just when we're together in one place, but that we're doing it with people that are in different places, just like right now.
And so if there's somebody that you know that you think would be a great fit, feel free to send us an email, info@connect.faith. We'd love to talk to them.
We're looking forward to sharing what we have with you and to growing in our understanding of everyday spirituality.
If you found this conversation and you're not subscribed, we would love to have you join us. We publish every other week. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We're also on Facebook. And of course, you can always find us on our website, connect.faith. We'll see you next time.